Hello YouTubers, welcome to my video. Making a video today on boat ops for DCS World's F-18. I got a bunch of guys that I fly with, and we've all been trying to wrap our head around it. And a lot of questions are coming up, how to make all this stuff work so that the game's ultimately enjoyable, right? I got a lot of videos out there, some good, some bad, a little bit more bad than good, and unfortunately the bad only exacerbates the frustration, especially when you're trying to wrap your head around this stuff for the first time. So yeah, making a video. Hopefully, I'll be able to clarify a lot of things and ultimately just make the game more enjoyable. Right? That's what it's all about. So, okay. So to start this off with, you just got to kind of understand that there's boat-specific procedures, and then there's airplane-specific procedures. So there's boat numbers and airplane numbers. Okay, and what I'm going to cover first is boat numbers. And these are primarily procedures that are expected to be adhered to by any aircraft that were to come aboard the ship. So with that, it's going to be the Vfr Recovery is what we're going to talk about. Case 1, I'm sure you've heard of that, Vfr Recovery. And that's going to encompass the holding pattern, the Marshaling Stack, how to exit it, how to how to recover, enter the initial into the break, and how to enter the pattern, how to fly a little bit of the pattern with a few techniques, hopefully, and then if you know how to depart the pattern, and then if you approach the pattern's full, how to spin it, and then return back for the break and hopefully enter the pattern there. And then after that's done, we'll cover how to set up the game, because there's actually some things that are required in the game to be set up, and it's a little bit more than just plopping an angle deck down on the water. The angle deck actually has to steam at a specific speed, or you have to have a specific amount of winds going over the round down so that all the timing works out properly. Basically, it equates to a headwind when you're flying the pattern. There's some good ways and bad ways to set up the aircraft. With regards to your TAC and your navigational aids, even down to your seat height adjustment if you don't like that, and then I'll try and set up a demo and actually walk the dog for you guys and give you a good eyeball cal to solidify in your brain, so that when you're practicing this at home, you're able to have a little bit more success in having something to reference to. So, all right. So let's come over to my trusty plane form view of my silly aircraft carrier drawings. So what we're going to talk about real first is when you approach the boat, there's there's a 10 nautical mile bubble around the boat. And basically, you can't pierce that 10 nautical mile bubble without talking to somebody. It's tantamount to ask and approach, hey, can I come to the boat and land, basically. Okay, so you can kind of envision a 10 nautical mile bubble around the boat. Now, say you were approaching the boat, you made all your radio calls, and obviously there's no weather, so it's going to be VFR, Case 1 Recovery. And you request to land at the boat, all right, and the boat says negative, Ghost Rider, the pattern is full, right? You're going to be expected to hold in a marshaling stack, okay? And the marshaling stack is this: it's an approximate 5 nautical mile. Well, it is a 5 nautical mile circle on the port side of the boat, something like that, all right? And it's and again, the diameter is about 5 nautical miles, okay? And the altitude starts at 1,500 feet, and they go up. So you can have a flight of, let's say you have a flight of 4 F-18 Hornets coming in, and they request recovery at the boat. The boat says negative, go Marshal at 2,000 feet, okay? What'll happen is lead will take his flight and tangentially enter the Marshaling Stack and basically fly 5 nautical mile circle at the altitude that he's assigned. Okay. And then other airplanes can come in, and they'll be stacked up with a minimum of 1,000 foot increments between each other. Okay, so you can envision a bunch of airplanes marshaling above the carrier here in 1,000 foot increments, just waiting for them to say, "Hey guys, you can come down and recover at the carrier." So, all right, so that's what happens when you come to the aircraft carrier and you cannot recover at that time. To get to the pattern, okay, and this is really what the case 1 means. Okay, case 1 the cases are simply a means of how do I get to the pattern. Okay. So to get to the pattern in a VFR recovery, a case 1 recovery, it's about getting to the initial. Now an initial is approximately 3 nautical miles from the stern of the ship at 800 feet. Okay, 300 nautical miles at 800 feet. Now let's say we were in the marshaling stack, and the powers that be come up on the radio and say, "Hey, Hammer 1-1, you're cleared. Your signal's Charlie. You can come on down and recover." The way that you ascend and descend in the marshaling stack is you draw a line through basically the boat. You have a bow and a stern through the 3-9 line of the boat, and you do all your climbing on the bow side and all your descending on the stern side. Okay, so if we're clear to come down for the initial, we exit the marshaling stack on the stern side of the circle. So it would be something as simple as just departing somewhere here. You'd start your descend, and you'd kind of loop it around, and you'd set yourself up to come in at the initial at 3 nautical miles at 800 feet. Okay. So once you get here, this is where the kind of the pattern stuff starts. Okay. So you're coming in 800 feet, and you're offsetted on the starboard side of the boat. Okay. And through various comms, the controlling agency may say, "Hey, report the initial," in which case you'd report a 3 nautical mile initial, and then they might say, report the ship or something to that effect. In which case, somewhere in here, you'd say, "Hey, I'm approaching the ship and I'm ready to go into the break." At the bow of the ship, if you're cleared for the break, okay, if you're cleared, you make a level turn, okay, and you're slowing down during this entire turn. So a level turn, so you're remaining 800 feet. Power comes to idle or whatever's appropriate for the platform that you're flying, and you're slowing down. You're trying to configure for whatever is appropriate for what you're flying. Once you are wings level downwind, you're configured and you're at on-speed airspeed. Okay, we'll cover that a little bit more later on, but just keep that in the back of your brain. Basically, you're going the same speed as everyone else. So you enter the break 800 feet. You don't descend yet until you're configured and going the same speed as everyone else. Once that happens, then you can go ahead and descend on down to the pattern, which is 600 feet. Okay, and you're flying the reciprocal heading of the boat's heading, which is BRC, and they'll give you that when you're checking into the Marshal, okay, which is BRC. So you're flying the reciprocal heading anywhere from a 1 mile to a 1.5 mile beam distance. All right, and we'll talk about what that needs to be more precisely for the Hornet later on. Okay. Once you get to the abeam position, and that's like no kidding, literally abeam the ship. All right. Basically, you make a 30-degree angle of bank turn coming off the 180. This is also called the 180. Approximate 30-degree angle of bank turn. That varies slightly depending on the aircraft, but for the most part, it's a 30-degree angle of bank turn. You maintain on speed as you come off. So on speed, 30 degrees angle of bank turn. And it's a slowly descending, it's a managed descent the entire way. All right. What you're looking for as you're coming off the 180, you're looking for an approximate 100 to 200 foot per minute descent. And this is kind of aircraft specific, but I might as well talk about it now. And then as you approach the 90 degree, which is somewhere in here, okay, you want around 500-ish, 600-ish, maybe a little bit less, maybe 450-ish, okay. And the altitude that you're looking to hit at the 90 is 450 feet, okay. So you come off the 180, 30 degrees angle of bank turn on speed. You start chipping away at your VSI, your vertical speed indicator. 100 foot per minute rate of descent, 200 foot, and then you increase it down to about 500 foot. As you pass the 90, you should fly through 450 feet. Okay? Now you got to remember the boat is steaming forward. So as the boat steams forward, the distance from here to here when you get to the 90 is going to be greater than the distance when you came off the 180. And what does this ultimately equate for you? It means that when you continue this 30 degree angle of bank turn, and you can see how in my drawing I'm starting to get backed up here, because if I draw a good circle I'm going to end where I start. Well, again, the boat will have steamed forward a little bit. So when I roll out here, I should be in a position, the angle deck here will have moved forward a little bit, and I should be in a position to continue the slight remainder roll that's required to line up on the angle. Okay? The altitude here is at around 290, about 300 feet-ish. Okay? And again, you're maintaining on speed. All right? I spent a lot of time right here. This is very important, obviously. But to be quite honest with you, the good success, success to be ensured on the ball can be traced all the way back, quite literally, to your brake turn and how you manage your energy with your abeam distance, on speed, and all that good stuff, so that when you get to the 180, you're not drastically trying to change the aerodynamic forces on the aircraft, so that your energy state is nice and manageable as you come off the 180. And you can hit all these wickets, 450, approximately 300, with a good 500, with a solid, stable 500 rate per minute descent. If you do all this correctly, you will, I know I say that with certainty, you will roll out with a ball on the lens. Okay? Once you get here, it's a matter of flying the ball. All right? And I kind of say that nonchalantly. I'm not going to quite go into ball flying on this particular video because I don't think the flight model of the aircraft facilitates at least the ball flying techniques that I'm used to. I'm sure I'm going to have to learn something totally new for the game, but just my general habit patterns don't seem to work perfectly in the sim, and I'm still trying to put my finger on it. So I'm not going to cover ball flying here. But the bottom line is, you fly a good pattern, you fly a good descending approach turn. If all your numbers are correct, 30 degrees angle of bank turn, 500 rate per minute descent, managed coming off the 180, flying through 450 feet at the 90, approaching 290 at the final, and then intercepting the center line for the angle deck. If all those work out well, you will arrive at a cone to intercept the ball on the lens. You fly the ball, and hopefully to a trap or a touch and go, okay, for a fair or an okay pass, right? All right, to get back into the pattern after you do a touch and go, or a bolter, basically you, the second your mains hit the deck, it's obviously MRT, and the aircraft flies away, okay? Until you've achieved a solid positive rate of climb, you come to a lazy right-hand turn to parallel BRC again, all right? And then at around, depending on your platform, but around 500 feet, then you could start your crosswind turn, okay? You haven't changed your configuration. You're still whatever the configuration was when you configured coming out of the brake. You haven't changed, you haven't brought flaps up or anything like that. You remain in the same configuration. You also remain the same speed on speed, okay? So as you approach, well, about a minimum of 500 feet so that you don't lose all that vertical lift and go into the drink, and as you approach your pattern altitude, which we said was what? 600 feet, then you start a nice, solid 30-degree angle of bank turn, and you hold that on speed, on altitude, and you roll out crisply on your reciprocal heading for downwind, okay? And then lather, rinse, repeat. You come up to the 180, come off the 180 as we discussed, fly the ball, do your touch and go in your bolter, MRT, climb away as you have a positive rate of climb, parallel BRC as you're approaching the pattern altitude, 30 degrees on speed, lather, rinse, repeat. Okay? That's the pattern, that's the meat and potatoes of what I'm trying to get at. A few caveats to this. Let's say as you're coming in, you've come out of the Marshall Stack, and you're coming in for the break. You got your 3 nautical mile, 800-foot initial, and you're coming in for the break, and you get to the break point, and the controlling agency basically says you got to spin it, okay? What he's telling you is they've got a bunch of chicks on downwind already, and you can have a maximum of 6 aircraft in the pattern at a time, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see why. It strings out the pattern, and it gets to the point where the boat can't manage the pattern properly, okay, for a myriad of reasons, all right? But for our scenario, let's say, again, you come in for the break, and you get to the break, and either the pattern's full or your interval will become a problem, okay? That if you break there, you'll basically end up on top of your interval. And these guys are all at 600 feet because they're in the pattern. You're at 800 feet. That's the reason why we deconflict with altitude, too. So that if there is ever a problem, that if you were to break over on top of somebody, you've got a 200-foot buffer to at least try and figure it out before you end up killing each other, all right? Okay, so what happens if you get here, you can't go into the break for whatever reason? Well, they're going to say spin it. All a spin is you take your flight and you basically fly at 1,200 feet, at 1,200 feet, in roughly this circle, and you just come back for the initial again. That's all a spin is. Basically, again, hey, the pattern's full, I can't take you in, spin it one time, and come back and report the initial, lather, rinse, repeat. Okay? So it's kind of an expedited way to manage all of the traffic without having to send you back up into the Marshall Stack. Now that being said, since you're below the Marshall Stack, the flights that come in the break that are spun have priority over anyone coming out of the Marshall Stack. Okay, so you can see how that you all you want to play those comms properly. The guys in the Marshall Stack want to be listening who's coming in for the break, who's being spun, and all that good stuff. There's a few other working points to that. Everybody has a time when they come out and when they can expect to recover and all that good stuff, but that just makes the game more tedious. So, but you could encounter something like this. Let's say you get 6 of your buddies all flying together, right? And you're all beating up the pattern, and then you got some other buddy, he logs in, and you say, hey, Roger established in the Marshall at 2,000, your signal's Charlie at this time. Your buddy gets into the Marshall Stack, and let's say for whatever reason, all your other buddies aren't trapping. They're just sucking it up that day, right? Well, the latecomer gets his Charlie time. He comes out of the stack and he reports the initial. Well, all your buddies in the pattern are like, well, wait a minute. We haven't made a hole for him yet. We still got a full pattern. As he comes in, you guys could come up on the radios and say, hey, you can expect to spin it upon reaching the break, unless one of us traps. Okay. And if one of you traps, then you can go ahead and tell your buddy, hey, you're cleared for the break, and he could tchotchke in. Or if nobody traps and you guys are still boltering, you could say spin it once, and then he'll go and fly this profile again and come back for the initial. So that's kind of a good game dynamic that you can kind of incorporate once everybody's chugging along and they've got these concepts kind of wrapped around, their heads wrapped around it. They'll be able to have some pretty good game dynamic with that. All right, so the last piece to this pie is, well, how do I get away from the boat? Okay, so we covered coming into the boat, we covered marshaling, we covered recovering, we covered what to do if we can't immediately recover. So how do we get away from the boat? Okay, so your case 1 departure, after you launch, or you bolt her into a touch and go, and they tell you you're a shot to the beach. Okay, you're basically going to use a approximate 20-degree-ish angle of bank to the right for about 20 degrees. Okay, and the idea is you're just getting away from the port side of the ship, because that's where all the fixed wing action is happening. Okay, so you're going to do 20 for 20. Okay, and you're going to clean up, get your gear up and your flaps and your slats or whatever the aircraft is that you're flying, and you're going to kind of level off at 500 feet, and you're going to accelerate on out. Okay, at approximately 7 nautical miles, that's when you can kind of start trying or beginning your climb and actually turning towards wherever it is that you want to go. All right, so again, you either cat launch, or you do your bolter, and you're probably bingoing back to home field. That's probably why you're departing after a bolter or something, after a touch and go, something like that. And after you do your climb away here, and the cat launch here, again, it's 20 for 20. Okay, clean up the airplane, come up to 500 feet, and just kind of accelerate away from the boat. Okay, and then when you're about 7 nautical miles, that's when you can do all your frequency changes. Okay, and all that good stuff. That's pretty simple, right? All right. And then if you want, another good game dynamic is after you go away, you can come back and request to come back into the boat, and you might marshal again, and then come on down, come in for the break, and lather, rinse, repeat. All right. Alrighty, so you can see how this is kind of just a merry-go-round that just keeps reiterating and reiterating. You can kind of understand the purpose why we have all these different altitudes for deconfliction, so we don't hit each other. You can understand why the air speeds in the pattern are very specific. The angle of banks and everything are very precise, because it allows us all to keep sight of each other and basically chug along in the Congo line and play in the sandbox without hurting each other. And yeah, that's basically it. So, all right, so now I'll go ahead and flop over and set us up to actually fly some of this stuff. And again, I'm going to go over how to set up the boat in the game. I'll also, you're going to get a lot more aircraft-specific information now with specific airspeeds and configuration settings and techniques on how to fly all that stuff. So, all right, we'll see you over in the aircraft. All right, welcome back. In this segment, we're going to cover how to set up the game now. So in the previous segment, we talked about all the pattern work and all the boat numbers and the boat ops and all those procedures and whatnot that you're expected to adhere to when you show up at the boat. Okay. Now we gotta set up the boat so that it behaves properly in DCS World, so that all those numbers that we talked about in the pattern and whatnot will actually come to fruition. Okay, and it all comes down to one thing, primarily one thing: the wind over the deck. Okay, you need about 25 to 30 knots winds coming over the deck. If you don't set it up, you're not going to get your groove length properly. If you turn off the 180 off your beam position, that's not going to work out. You're going to be too close to the ship when you roll out, and all that stuff's just going to frustrate the heck out of you. So winds over the deck, 25 to 30 knots. All right, so how do we set that up? I'm not going to go too much into actually setting up a mission from scratch. I'm just going to show you how I like to set up the carrier to achieve these winds so that you can actually fly the pattern. There's other tutorials out there to set up a mission. It's beyond the scope of this. So, that being said, I've already got a mission set up that I use with all my friends, and I'll load it here, and there she is. There's the boat. Okay. Now, there's two ways that you can get winds coming over the deck. One is natural winds, right? So, as far as natural winds in the game, basically you're going to set them up over here in the weather, and you can pick the heading and the speed and all that good stuff. And if you set up natural winds for 25 knots, 25, 30 knots, and you just plop your carrier down there in the ocean and don't have it move anywhere, it'll take some work to get it oriented properly, because you want that headwind to come right down the angle deck. So not down BRC, but down the angle deck. So that'll take a little trial and error, but that's one way to do it. So you can set up the natural winds, make it come right down the angle deck, and away you go. The other way, and my preferred way, because it just kind of seems a little more realistic, is typically you don't have that luck in real life to get nice, beautiful, clean winds oriented down the angle deck. Typically, the boat has to steam and create some of that wind for you. So I like to have my boat basically drive some sort of box pattern. The box pattern is set up so that each of its runs are on cardinal headings, east, west, north, south. And I simply make the speed of the boat 25 to 30 knots. I actually set it up for 27 knots, right in the middle. Okay, and that can be done right over here, your waypoints, and you just throw their speed in there, 27 knots. And if you're feeling real froggy, you can change the speed slightly for each of the different legs, and you can adjust when you come off the 180 for those slight wind variations. But it's got to be in real life, the boat shoots for 25 to 30 knots over the deck. Okay. Okay, so in real life, just for trivia's sake, might as well explain it to you. In real life, these two different methods of getting winds, they've both got their strengths and weaknesses. Pilots typically like the natural winds. Primarily because you can get the wind oriented right down the angle, and it's nice and clean headwind. It doesn't feel like the boat's constantly running away from you. And if the wind were coming right down the bow to stern, right down the steaming line of the ship, BRC, it tends to get disrupted by the tower, and it creates what's known as the burble. So the wind comes over the deck, and it hits the tower, and it kind of creates a burble, and that kind of affects your ball flying when you start getting in close. So you get to avoid the burble, okay? The downside to natural winds coming right down the angle in real life is the ship doesn't have to move all that much. So if the ship doesn't have to steam, she's a little bit more susceptible to a pitching deck, because she's just kind of sitting there bobbing around. And that creates a whole slew of new problems for a pilot trying to come aboard. As far as the other way to get winds with the boat steaming, well, your downside, as we already said, was that you'll get the burble coming from the winds hitting the tower there. Another downside is, since the winds aren't coming down the angle and they're coming down the direction that the boat's steaming, it's going to seem as if, here, your vantage point in the tower, or in the camera here, so if the boat's coming this way and the angle obviously is coming forward as well, well, as you roll out and you're constantly trying to line up with the angle, well, the angle's going to be running away from you, and you're going to constantly be needing to come right for lineup. So you'll kind of get that sensation that, gosh, the boat's running away on me. I got to keep coming right to pick it up. In real life, the good things about the ship steaming a little bit, making some of its own wind, is that it tends to cut through the surf a little bit better, so you don't have to worry about quite as much of a pitching deck. Relatively speaking, of course, if the seas are going crazy, it's going to pitch whether you like it or not. So me personally, as far as how I like to set it up in the game, I like to set up the boat driving around in the cardinal headings. It just kind of seems a little more realistic, and it changes it up when the boat makes the 90-degree turns, and it just kind of, I don't know, just kind of makes it more enjoyable for me. So, all right, so that's basically covering up how to set up the boat, the two different ways that you can set up the winds, and you want that target 25 to 30 knots, winds over the deck, and once you set that up in your game, you'll have a great mission for you and your friends to go out and try all this boat ops carrier 1 VFR, or I'm sorry, case 1 VFR pattern stuff. So, all right, now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop in the jet and see how it works.